Little Archie, issue 175, Broom Zoom. Sabrina says her clock didn't go off this morning. Doesn't she mean her alarm? It's nice of her to let her cat sleep on her pillow. Zelda cheerfully tells her that her breakfast is on the table, and while she's late for school, Zelda tells her that if she flies to school on a broom, she won't be. She shouldn't have to be told this. Sabrina flies on a broom with her homework bag in her hand instead of wearing a backpack for some reason like I always wore to school. Why doesn't she just teleport to some bushes near the school? That'd be faster and no one would see her. She could create a bush. She hears the late bell and hopes she can fit through the door. Weatherby wonders how many students he's going to snare today. Looking like an asshole because he wants to go out of his way to catch students that are late to find any excuse possible to punish students. I assume he's portrayed like this is a parody, a joke, because it's a cartoon. I hope this is just an exaggeration that barely happens in real life. Wouldn't he be in his office, doing paperwork or something? I assume most principals have too much to do that actually matters to waste their time with this pettiness. Isn't this what a hall monitor is for? I never saw one. Predictably, Sabrina warps to school, and for some reason the teleportation brings a bunch of dust into the room this time. Reggie sees this, but you'd think others would, like Grundy, who was staring at the entire class at once. I guess she was looking at the roll call paper when she warped there, but she'd still be confused that she's suddenly here. Reggie knows Sabrina was flying with the broom, and Grundy tells Sabrina to pass some paper, and tells Reggie to put Sabrina's broom in the hole. Why doesn't she question that Sabrina has a broom? It seems arbitrary that she'd tell Reggie, who should be her least favorite and least trusted student, to do this, while telling Sabrina to pass out the paper when it's her broom. This was just a lazy excuse for Reggie to get the broom. I can't blame him for wanting to fly with the broom. He would have wanted to do that for a long time. And I can't get enough of the fact that someone's smart enough to know she's a witch and is brave enough to act on it. So he flies with the broom in front of Weatherby. Then he crashes into walls and gets an exaggerated 10 detentions for damaging school property. That's all he wants to say in response to a flying broom? I guess he already knows about flying brooms if Sabrina's this obvious. He should already know. He did see someone fly by him in a broom before. You'd think the broom wouldn't fly into the wall unless Reggie told it to, because it'd be a magic broom controlled by his thoughts. I understand why Reggie started flying with it literally as soon as possible, because flying with it is faster than just running and trying to run out of school. And if he waited too long, he'd get in trouble for taking too long to go back to class. And Sabrina could warp the broom back to her eventually. Weatherby tells Reggie he's not allowed to leave the school, and Reggie at least gets the chance to tell him that he doesn't want to leave, and just doesn't know how to stop. But you'd think the flying broom would stop as soon as he wanted to, because without any clear means of jet propulsion or a spinning fan or wings, it's clearly only moving in response to his thoughts. Why would there be retained momentum at that point? I know it's wrong to steal someone's broom, but he doesn't deserve detentions for it, because he didn't prove he was going to steal it outright. I thought he was just planning to borrow it for a bit, because he'd know she could get it back with magic anyways. And he couldn't just ask if he could please fly on the broom for a bit, because she'd just feel like lying that it can't fly. Sabrina predicted that Reggie would try the broom out. Fortunately, she uses magic to get the broom back to her. You'd think she wouldn't do that because she's in class and people would see her and comment on it. Also, she said both of her text bubbles out loud for everyone to hear. But if everyone knows she's a witch and is just plain dumb, or at least think her broom's magical but not her family, that'd explain it. She says she'd better get this in her locker. Reggie should have just put the broom in his locker. But I guess he assumed that it'd get bound or warped back to her before he'd get to ride it. Grundy spitefully says that if Reggie's not back here in 1 minute, she'll mark him as absent for the day. I assume that she didn't get the chance to mark him down as present yet. Jughead calls Reggie a flake, and the story ends with Reggie hanging from a tree. I get why Sabrina doesn't trust Reggie, so she doesn't like it that he knows. But whether she likes it or not, he knows. So I wish she was just honest with him about being a witch, so she'd have at least one friend she was open about it with. I'd rather her use magic in front of him and take advantage of that than confuse me, because she gets away with magic in front of others with no reaction. He clearly knows, and he's smart enough to figure it out no matter how many times he's made to forget it. It'd be nice if he actually followed a system with her where he did 2 good things every time he asked her to use magic for him. Like, work at a soup kitchen alongside her. So it'd be worth letting him take advantage of her. This story actually made me feel sorry for Reggie. All he wanted to do was have a fun ride on a broom. But Weatherby went out of his way to look for late students instead of being busy in the principal's office, and just had to catch him when he could have been in one of the many other parts of the school at the time. Also, his ride doesn't even get to be fun most of the time. You'd think the broom would stop when its flyer wanted to and wouldn't crash into walls unless it's told to, because it moves in response to the user telling it to fly ahead with his mind. I wish the story ended with Sabrina using magic to fix the damage to the school walls, causing Weatherby to assume he just hallucinated the flying broom scene. And if he was being in character, he would have assumed that. Little Archie, issue 176, never on Sunday. Sabrina plans on going to Pop Tate's with $1, but from contrived sheer bad luck, the second she shows up there, he paints a sign to say that the Super Sundae costs 50 cents more. At least he didn't know she was about to order it, but come on. So she tells him she's not going to order anything, and when she says in front of him that she was just in the mood for a Super Sundae, he thinks that she's strange for it, which she should have known she could have avoided if she outright told him that she can't afford the sundae anymore. It would have been nice to see him get called out on the fact that he lost a customer for the day because he foolishly raised the price. You'd think she would tell him the truth in the hopes that he would let her have the sundae. She complains to Zelda, who tells her to just solve the problem with magic. She wouldn't have to be told that. Rather than her saying that she's gonna brainwash him into lowering the price to what's supposed to be, she decides to make a sundae herself. Sabrina's smart enough to ask her if she thinks she should, which is only smart because it makes her look genre savvy of how inexcusably incompetent Zelda usually is. Because with a normal witch, zapping up a sundae shouldn't have any consequences. Sabrina should have just created one of his sundaes with magic as soon as she went home. Zelda tries to use a spell and potion to create a sundae. Why not just point? Why is she even bothering when she should know that Sabrina wants that specific sundae recipe that she shouldn't have access to? While Zelda creates a sundae, a diabolic ex machina happens because Jughead magically breaks down the door because he somehow smells a sundae in Sabrina's house, which he has no business being in. It needed to be established that he literally lives next door. Otherwise, this seems unfair. Jughead eats some of the sundae with his fingers, and then disappears. He turned invisible because there was vanishing powder in the kettle, for no reason. Zelda says she'll change him back, but arbitrarily decides to walk away to look for an antidote. I have to just assume that the vanishing powder that had no business being used in a sundae recipe when she's been a witch for centuries stays in someone's stomach and would turn them invisible again after Sabrina would point at him to make him visible. So that's why she'd need to find an antidote. But without that explanation, it looks stupid. Too bad none of the witches thought to cast a spell so that he couldn't move until he got the antidote, while still able to breathe. Jughead, not questioning at all how this is possible as if he's already used to Sabrina being a witch, simply says he could take advantage of being invisible and predictably tries to escape to find something to eat. Being visible was the only thing keeping him from stealing people's food, so he doesn't even have being a good person going for him. You'd think if he was good, he'd feel too bad about making someone cry to continue this behavior, or not bother even trying because he'd know that he'd make her upset. Zelda has the antidote finished already, so at least she doesn't take an unrealistically long time to make it to pan out the story. Then she asks how they could find an invisible person, and Sabrina wants to follow his trail. Lucky for them, he predictably headed straight for Pop Tate's. Of course he'd take the shortest route there, so they know where to go. He eats a burger he stole, and Zelda splashes him with something to make him visible again. Reggie was fortunately the one who got a burger stolen from him, and he threatens Jughead. Sabrina's sympathetic because she wants to leave because she can't stand violence. Fortunately, Zelda plans on using magic to bring back Jughead's teeth. So witches can heal. Why does she need to go home for that? What's with her potion obsession when she's clearly bad at it? Why doesn't Zelda or Sabrina just cast a spell to heal him? He already knows that invisibility potion exists. This story took an arbitrary leap from Zelda making Sabrina a sundae when she clearly wanted a very specific sundae that she could have just sapped up herself. It makes a leap from that to Jughead turning invisible after bursting down the door of Sabrina's house somehow and arbitrarily showing up to eat a little of the sundae, which probably melted by the time the story was over. Why can't Sabrina just tell Zelda no? Sabrina should have been out of magic in this story, in every story where she went to her aunts for help. If she knew that Zelda shouldn't, it's because she didn't trust her, so she shouldn't have let her try to help. You'd think Zelda would have given up on potions by now if she's so accident-prone with mixing it, even after hundreds of years of experience. She should have a different hobby. Where was Zelda in all this? All Jughead does is the most predictable thing for him to do with invisibility. He barely gets the habit and just looks like a thief with no empathy. At least if Reggie was made invisible, there'd be actual variety in what he'd be doing while invisible. But then it'd be even harder to justify why I'd have gone to her house to see her Sunday. Maybe he could have been written to try to see her house to find magical artifacts or witness magic. That'd be more believable than Jughead randomly being there just to smell a sundae somehow. The only person Jughead should have been written to steal food from was Reggie, because I'd understand it with him. The next issue just has a Sabrina reprint. Little Archie, issue 178, A Summer Haunting. We start out seeing Sabrina's family all flying on a broom heading for the beach. Zelda found a place where she could stay for free by recklessly exchanging her house for theirs. I guess she assumes that they won't find any of the magical items in her house and use them. But why does no one anticipate that happening when Zelda can immediately access her potion ingredients from the living room and kitchen? Somehow nobody lampshades her incredibly stupid decision. She could have just brainwashed to get the same effect without risking people getting blown up by a potion or worse. They go to a haunted castle that has a sign calling it that as if it's just a tourist attraction. It turns out Zelda gave her house to some ghosts, and she reasons that they won't eat any of their food. They could still try to use their potions, but I assume they won't because they know better than to try to do that without the know-how, if ghosts are already very familiar with witches. Zelda gives Sabrina a sheet and tells her to put it on. Apparently the family has to haunt the castle too. Why? Can't they do whatever they want here? They all have to wear bedsheet ghost costumes that nobody would actually take seriously. Maybe it's for little kids. Sabrina fortunately says she doesn't like to scare people. She's told that people love to be scared. Well, people do watch horror movies and choose to visit haunted houses. And there's a sign telling people to visit a haunted castle in the first place. So she has a reason to think this. Then someone screams at a spider and runs away. Sabrina fortunately decides to take action by herself and head for the beach instead of sticking with her aunts and doing whatever they say even if she hates it. Conveniently, all of her friends are at the beach too. Some people think that her aunts are a laugh riot when they're trying to scare people with their costumes. I guess the reason they're laughing now is that one of them has a witch hat on stubbornly when she should know she's not allowed to. If the people always laughed, well, maybe the ghost wants to make people laugh. That'd be more realistic. Maybe the ghosts don't look like bedsheet ghosts, and they wanted to humiliate the ants. Predictably, the ants decide to do something witches are good at. Hilda decides to give people a broom ride, and Zelda's happy that the people like them. Sure, it's convenient that people aren't just freaked out at seeing witches when they came here to see ghosts. Sabrina says everyone in Riverdale's here at the beach. That's impossible. I guess she's exaggerating or naive. Archie says people are being frightened out of town from all sorts of weird sounds. Jughead ends the story saying that they all seem to come from Sabrina's house. I wish I saw what was happening at Sabrina's house. I have to assume the ghosts are using the magical items from her house to achieve this unrealistically evil goal. Because otherwise, why didn't they achieve this earlier? A lot of the stories in Little Sabrina are by Dexter Taylor. This story was about Zelda recklessly trading her house with some ghost from a haunted castle that she knew to get a place she could stay at for free to have an easy time finding a place at the beach, when she could have just used brainwashing to find a place at the beach instead. But somehow this isn't a cliche story about what happens when the wrong people get a hold of the magical items in Sabrina's house. But the ghosts must have used those to scare people to the beach. I can understand Sabrina's neighbors being scared to the beach, but it's not like everyone in Riverdale could hear the ghost wailing in Sabrina's house at once. The story has Sabrina's aunts just make people laugh in their ghost costumes, and then somehow merely entertain them by being obvious witches. I'm glad Sabrina was allowed to opt out of trying to scare people. If this was the animated series, she'd be forced to do what they say anyways.